In today's video, we are going to find out how the brand new players went with their crazy bell plan for Gnomengarde. Hello everyone and welcome back to the TheDMSide, a place for DMs, new and old, as well as players talk everything Dungeons & Dragons. This series, we are following a group of brand new players as they work their way through the Dragon of Icespire's Peak Essentials kit. It's been, 5-6 weeks now, so if you are just joining us now and want to go back to the very first video, click on the link up here and we'll see you in a couple of videos. Today, we are going to find out how did their crazy plan go with these bells and what happens next. Last we left, the players had set up an array of different bells on wires all throughout Gnomengarde, and they were just about to start their watches for the night. What they did was, in the waterway part that goes down, there's a river in the middle of Gnomengarde. 3 of them stood on one entrance on one side and 2 stood on the other entrance, the other side. So on one side we had Janet and Rain, the furthest away from the group, and then we had on the other side of the river Gobbleknock, Bubbles, and Janet. And they're all watching for the night, waiting to see if one of the bells rang. Eventually, one of the bells did ring. One of the mimics was moving around through the area. So I had them all roll perception checks to see what they could hear. However, everyone on the closer side with the lower DC rolled all 1s and 3s and just got so low they couldn't even hear it. Whereas the other 2, Janet and Rain, rolled like 20 something and they could hear perfectly. So they start trying to wave out to the group and say, hey, there's a bell, we can hear it. And they're just waving back. And it was one of the most interesting things, watching these poor characters and visualizing it. Eventually, they start to scan the area to start to see if they could notice anything. By this point, I had the mimic, that was a chest, or a barrel at the time, move up to the bridge area near the waterfall, and it entered up onto the bridge, which set off an array of bells that they'd laid through the entire bridge, and then it very quickly moved back and stopped to hide as a chest. So, all of a sudden, most of the players hear that. Janet and Rain look up over at the waterfall and can spot this chest. They decide they're going to head on over. The other group, who also heard it, thought, well, we're going to head on in, and we'll meet them at the bridge. On their way, they walk past the room full of barrels. And in here, it's where I've put this second mimic. They see a door. And I mentioned to Bubbles, and I mentioned to Janet as well, not Janet, sorry, Tig, you've been in this room. When you were setting up your bells, there was not another door in here. So they decided to stop going to the bridge and split the party. Gobbleknock, Tig, and Bubbles the monk moved into the room with the barrels, while the paladin and the other barbarian, Janet and Rain, moved and took their way up to the bridge. And this is where things got a little crazy because I didn't expect this to happen. I thought that they would stay as a group. To be fair, I split the monsters up to make it a bit easier for them, not for them to split up. But again, this is what happens in D&D, and I mentioned that door. So again, impro moments, they really matter. But from there, we had Janet and Rain inspecting this chest. They didn't want to touch it. But then eventually, Janet said, look, I'm going to take my sword and I'm going to reach out to poke it. At the same time, simultaneously in the other room, Bubbles was inspecting the door and decided, look, I'm going to turn around and I'm just going to touch it with my tail to try and open it up, thinking maybe it's a magical door and it goes somewhere else. So simultaneously, sword and tail touch, and all of a sudden, roll initiative. Both mimics react, they get stuck to it, and all of a sudden we go into combat. Janet and Rain are out there smiting and slamming this chest against the wall of the river, the roaring waterfall around them, so the others can't even hear their battle going on. In the other room, we have Bubbles, who is now stuck to this door that has opened its maw up and is reaching out, and I'm really glad I had the new mini. I'll put a picture up with the actual mimic door, and all of a sudden she's like, well, I can't do anything. She wants to punch it, but realizes that she's stuck to it. If she punches it, she's going to get stuck to it. So she's using her key points to dodge and keeping it trapped, funnily enough, within that room there. Gobbleknock has moved off to the side, raging, throwing his javelins at it, trying to destroy this creature, while Tig has summoned a fly swatter for a spiritual weapon and is smacking against this mimic door. And over time, they do manage to defeat the creature, and Bubbles is released from its grasp, and they have this weird grey meaty flesh to prove that they've defeated it. While that's happening, we have Janet and Tig who finally rage and smite enough to slam their Mimic and destroy it as well, taking a lot of damage, but luckily the Barbarian being able to take half damage meant that they lasted a lot longer. Rain healed up Janet and then they headed off to go and see their friends. This took almost the entire session. They did go and see the kings. They got their reward. They were given their silly little wizard's hat, which after spending some time with, realized this hat will not protect you from dragons at all. And Harbin has no idea what he's even talking about. They were given some of the crazy gifts from Fibble, Stib, and Dabbledob from their inventions. So they took some of those, but realizing this was kind of a big waste of time, but an entertaining one, they trekked their way back to Phandalin, seeing that tower in the distance once more, just to create that intrigue. They get back to Phandalin, and they head off to Harbin, they get their reward, and they give him the magical hat. And this is where all D&D players go, this guy's an idiot, it's time to mess with him. They convince him that the way the hat works is it turns you invisible. And they all pretended and rolled high enough on their deception checks that they couldn't see Harbin when he wore the hat. And they then told him that it had charges of like 3 or 5 more things before it would run out. And then every 10 day it would recharge. And he believed them. And so he would sit there whenever they entered into a room with the hat on, pretending to be invisible, and they had to kind of go along with it until he realized that, oh, they can't see me, haha, here I am. And it got a lot of laughs, and it's just one of those crazy things that's going to really bite them later on when they realize Harbin's going around pretending to be invisible and might actually be stealing from people, and he may be taken in. I don't know. We'll find out in a few days' time in game. Where to next, however? They spent the rest of the session speaking about, do we go see the Banshee to get some questions answered? Or shall we go to Neverwinter and up to the Neverwinter Woods to get our 400 gold worth for the wagon delivery, and then maybe buy some items or potions or something to help us with actually defeating a dragon. Eventually they decided, once again, they just don't think that they have the right questions for the Banshee right now. So they're going to put that off, and they would much rather head on up to get this big payment, this 400 gold payment, so they might have enough money to purchase some magical weapons. The end of the session is that they're going to head off to Neverwinter along the high road and then travel along the river, possibly through Thundertree, to then give the goods off to Harbin's brother for a payday of 400. And that'll only take 4 days, should nothing else get in the way. My plan is along the way, we will have a random encounter where the Manticore that is meant to be for Umbridge Hill is actually going to attack them. And then that way they'll know that there are these larger creatures out there, that they've also been displaced. And on top of that, I'm considering having the green dragon make an appearance. I don't know if it's going to actually speak with them. I don't know if the green dragon is going to maybe attack another caravan or just be seen in the skies just over near Thundertree, near the Neverwinter Woods, so they understand that that's kind of in their path. But we'll see how we go with that. For now, check out these videos so that way you don't miss out on any of the upcoming content. Subscribe as well if you want to keep up to date with this story, and I will see you next week to see how did it go in Neverwinter?